Hello folks, LA Little here, and today's topic is how do you find a trade? I've been asked this several times, and so I thought, well, let's just do a video and take on one example of it. You can find trades. If you look at the tools here, there's a bunch of different ways to find trades, but you can also find trades just through an idea. I was looking at Zero Hedge I guess it was a couple days ago, and I saw this article talking about commercial lending over in Europe having problems. And I thought to myself, well, if they're having problems, then maybe there's a trade there, so let's take a look. So if we click here, I've set up the three symbols I'm interested in. So EUFN is the symbol for the European banks. So if I click on that, that will pop up several charts, but I've got it narrowed down just the one we care about, which is the weekly chart. And the weekly is usually where I find my trades if I'm going to find them, because I'm usually not day trading that much anymore. But if I look here, it's like, okay, they had a breakdown bar here, big volume spike down back in March. This was when Credit Suisse had its problems. Did a retest region here that failed, and then did the one on this, and that one held, and now it's come back up, but it hasn't made new highs. And it's like, okay, that's really interesting. If we haven't made new highs, then maybe there is a trade to the downside. So I go over and I look at the CACs, because I know that the CACs and the DAX have been strong, and sure enough, they've made new highs. Here's the CACs. This is the French market up at new highs. If I look at the DAX, same thing, made new highs. So you got financials that are lagging basically in Europe. And so maybe there's a trade there. So if we go back to the watch list, come back into EUFN and say, okay, so what does this trade look like? Well, if I look here, and let's just go through all of them. If I just pull up the daily and say, okay, what's the daily look like? Well, the daily is just kind of a range, right? It's not much happening. You had this big spike down, now a range. Actually, this is kind of bullish. It's not bearish, if anything. If I look at that weekly, that's right here, hanging at the top, trying to get over that breakdown bar. So it's possible if it gets over this, there's a trade to the upside. But if it doesn't, maybe there's a trade to the downside. So if I go to the monthly and say, okay, what does a monthly look like? This one's a little bit more interesting, because here you have this swing point low that was broken, and it was broken back here on this bar. You can see it there. Goes down, comes back up. And what does it do? Well, that's a retest regen. And as it's coming back up, it's going to retest, and it's going to try to regenerate to the downside. Now, if we look at it, the question is does it get over it? Because that's where it breaks it or it doesn't. And if I highlight that thing, it shows me 1993 is the high, and I go over here and I kind of poke around and say, okay, what are these numbers? That one's lower. Whoops, there's a close over 1993. When you get a close over 1993, that says this retest region failed. And if it failed, that says it's going to try and go break a swing point high. So this actually looks as if, from a technical standpoint, judge where the odds are, that it wants to go higher. That doesn't make for a trade on the downside. Given the push already, I'm not so sure if this is where I want to be on the upside. There's probably better trades. So it fails, and sometimes they do fail. And that's the way that one worked out. But next time I come back, we'll take a look at a different one. We'll see a trade that actually works.